Inspiring workplaces. I've been privileged to work in a lot of inspiring workplaces. And what makes them inspiring isn't, just the actual shiny building or the furniture or the perks that there are. It's the people. And these inspiring people all have one thing in common, and that's how supportive they are when it comes to neurodiversity. So, what is neurodiversity and why is it important? And who am I to be talking to you about this stuff? Well, as well as being a neurodiversity consultant, I'm also an author. I wrote How to Be Autistic. And I have won some awards for my neurodiversity consultancy, Firebird. I'm a middle-aged, middle-class white woman, and as you can probably tell from my hair, I have recently bought a French crimper, but I have not yet learned how to use it. But today's not all about me at all. It's all about you. This is your opportunity to learn about neurodiversity in a judgment-free environment. And if you've got any questions at the end, I'm going to leave my details so you can get in touch with me afterwards if there's something on your mind. I'm a really busy woman. I don't have time to get offended. So if you want to know anything, just get in touch. And I've represented you in this picture with a blue-ringed octopus, because like the octopus, you're probably a lot smarter when it comes to inclusion than you're giving yourself credit for. And like this blue-ringed octopus, which is the only venomous octopus, you probably have a lot more impact than you realize. So with that in mind, what are we going to be talking about today? Well, first up, we're going to be asking, what is neurodiversity? Secondly, why is it important? And then finally, in section 3, what do I need to do? So starting with, what is neurodiversity? What do we mean when we say the term neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is an umbrella term which relates to the diversity of human brains. How we think, how we feel, how we process our emotions, how we express those, our behavior, how we communicate, and so on. But neurodiversity also refers to a specific set of neurodevelopmental conditions. And these are dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, ADHD, that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autism. We're going to go through all of those in a moment. Now, I used to have neurodiversity, thinking of these conditions as being in one place and then neurotypical being in another separate place. Neurotypical people are the majority of people without one of these neurodevelopmental conditions. And I've added neurotypical people to the list of neurodiversity because although if you're neurotypical, you don't have one of these conditions, you are still an important part when it comes to neurodiversity, because when we talk about inclusion, we're talking about everyone. And in fact, I go further than that. You're not just an important part of the neurodiversity conversation, you are essential because you balance us. You can do things that we struggle with. You have talents and abilities that neurodivergent people may not have. So you are an essential part of the neurodiversity conversation. What isn't neurodiversity, though? Well, mental illness, I would not put under the umbrella of neurodiversity. Some people do, but I don't, and I'll tell you why. If you've got a neurodivergent condition, one of the ones that I just listed, there's nothing wrong with you. You might struggle with a lot of things. You might suffer from being in a world that wasn't built for you, but there's nothing actually wrong with the way you're made. If you have a mental illness, if you are mentally unwell, that's an indication that something's gone wrong. And I feel very strongly that if that has happened to somebody, that person should get treatment for that. And I know sometimes that can be difficult, and I know some mental health issues are difficult to treat, but I think we should at least try, because I don't think that anyone deserves to live a life where they're always depressed or always anxious or struggling with everything. Neurodiversity is also not a learning disability. It's not an intellectual disability. Now, some people can have a neurodivergent condition and a learning disability at the same time, but it's not necessarily the case. And the last thing that isn't neurodiversity is a massive problem for everyone to be weird about. I find a lot of people tiptoe around neurodiversity, and sometimes that comes from a place of care, which is lovely, but we don't have to turn it into this big, frightening thing when neurodiversity is actually so easy to accommodate and such a fun thing to be aware of. So going through the individual conditions now, we're going to start with dyslexia. And I've represented dyslexia here with a cat in a box. Cats are really good at knowing where they can fit. If you found that, they can get into a box that you think is far too small for them, or they can get through a gap that you think is going to be too small. And dyslexics are like that too. Not that they're always getting in boxes. It's the fact that they're really visual and spatial. They can think in 3 dimensions really well. They can know what fits together, and they can do that metaphorically and strategically too. They can look at a problem like it's a box and find a solution that fits that exactly. It's a wonderful skill. So with dyslexia, they're brilliant at this visual and spatial stuff. You see lots of dyslexics in fields like visual arts, graphic design, architecture, things like that. But being a visual and spatial thinker means they're not so good at the detail, which means they have challenges with reading, writing, and spelling. And that's difficult because we live in a world of words. And that's why a lot of dyslexics were told that they're stupid. And I work with a lot of dyslexic people, and this is one thing they consistently tell me. When they were at school, they were told they were stupid because they couldn't communicate in the same way as other people. They weren't so good at the reading or the writing, and they didn't like reading out loud and so on. They're not, though, but this is what they've been told. So that's some of that baggage that many dyslexic people carry with them. What about dyspraxia? Dyspraxia is also known as a developmental coordination disorder, a bit like this baby panda. Now, you've seen those videos of baby pandas tumbling around. I'm multi-dyspraxic myself, actually. And, you know, it is trouble with moving your body and knowing where you are in relation to everything else, and clumsiness and so on. But like the baby panda, it's not something that you can't learn to adapt to. So we find with dyspraxia, people are often very persevering because they learn these things that we need to know, things like, you know, going swimming or riding a bike, things like that. So we find with dyspraxia, one of the best things about dyspraxics is that they tend to be quite persevering. They tend to be resilient, which is a great quality to have in the workplace. The defining characteristic, of course, is that they have trouble with fine and or gross motor movement. So when we talk about a fine motor movement, that might be something like using a pen or your phone, or even something like a door handle, whereas a gross motor movement would be something you do with your whole body. So things like walking through a door, walking up and down the stairs, carrying stuff around, and so on. And with dyspraxics, they're always the last to be picked for the team. I don't know if that's something that you can relate to too, but we tend not to be very good at sport. You know, all that coordination and things tends to be the last to be picked for the team. So again, that's something that would resonate with dyspraxic people. Dyscalculia, represented here by the beaver. Did you hear that story recently where a government they were going to build a dam, and they were talking about it and sorting it out and this and that, and while they were doing all that, the beavers just went ahead and built it, because beavers are really good at building and shapes and spaces and things like that. And that's why I've used them to represent people with dyscalculia, because dyscalculics are very good at shapes and strategy. Quite similar to dyslexics, in fact, and there's a huge overlap with people who have both dyslexia and dyscalculia. It's quite common to have both of those conditions. In fact, dyscalculia, which is the least known of all the neurodivergent conditions, is sometimes known as number dyslexia. They find maths and numbers challenging. So any mathematical operation, anywhere that numbers appear, there might be time or money, working out percentages, APR, rates of repayment, stuff like that. All of that is really difficult for somebody with dyscalculia. And dyscalculics thought they were stupid. Again, they may not have known, and some people even now, grown up, they don't know that they might have dyscalculia, and they have internalized that inability to do maths, or to do mental arithmetic, or to remember strings of numbers, you know, like your PIN number, or all those numbers that we use in daily life. And they've quite often internalized that and thought they were stupid, which again, like the dyslexics, they're not. ADHD, one of the conditions that I have. I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 48, and I've represented here ADHD here with a cheetah. Now, cheetahs are known for running really fast, right? And people with ADHD can work really fast, but not all the time. Do you know what cheetahs do most of the time? They're just lying around. And people with ADHD do that as well. When we're in the zone, when we really need to do something, we can go really, really fast and have hyper focus. But a lot of the rest of the time, we might just sit around. Unlike the cheetah, we're not always resting, like we heard about in the last talk, which was great, by the way. It's not that restorative rest. It's that time that we spend, maybe doom scrolling or just sitting zoning out, because sometimes we get so overwhelmed with the way our mind is always going that it's challenging to relax. We are fast and creative thinkers. That's one of my favorite things about ADHD, actually, being able to have that speed, being able to think creatively a lot of the time. But on the downside, we cannot organize our way out of a paper bag. This is quite frustrating. It can be frustrating for colleagues, but it's frustrating for us as well, because we want to do these things. And sometimes we waste so much time and money because we forget things, we get distracted, we don't know where stuff is, we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. So it can be a really challenging condition to have in this modern world. And we were told when we were at school that we were lazy. And other neurodivergents get told this too, but this is really common with people with ADHD. Every school report I have is must try harder. It's like, well, I don't really know what that means or how to. I am trying. I just can't. I don't understand why these things aren't working for me. And autism. I've represented autism with this bowerbird. I don't know if you're familiar with the bowerbird, but these are birds that they create a nest in the shape of a bower, like a little twig cave, and they collect things of particular colours to pile up to attract a mate. It's really cute, and autistic people like to do that too. We like to collect things, we like to organise things, and we like to make things look pretty as well. So we are clear and concise and detail focused. That's one of the characteristics that's fairly well known about autism. We do tend to be quite detail focused. On the downside, we tend to overlearn. That's a very much a simplification of autism, because it's a very, very complex condition. But one of the ways that we face challenges is that we tend to extrapolate a lot from one particular incident. So that can lead to a lot of trauma. It can lead to avoiding situations. When somebody is horrible to us or says we've been rude or we're odd or we don't get the joke, we kind of internalize that and then think, oh, everybody's going to be like that. Or we have one bad experience and we think every place we go to that's similar is going to be like that too. So it is quite challenging to live with. And I know that because I was diagnosed with autism when I was 46. And we were told we're weird in a bad way. I have been told I'm weird my whole life. We don't really fit in. We get left out of a lot of things. And a lot of the time we don't really understand why. So it can be challenging to be autistic, but like the bowerbird, there's a lot of beauty and a lot of joy in being autistic too. And finally, neurotypicals, represented here as a golden retriever. Look at that lovely dog. Doesn't that look nice? And neurotypicals are also lovely, lovely people. You're often balanced, grounded, and able to function, something that I do envy a lot of the time when I work with a lot of neurotypicals. There's a lot in my family, and some of them, they just have this calmness and stability that is really enjoyable to be around. They can be limited in scope. But what I mean by this, neurotypicals can be as talented and skilled as anyone else. But what I mean is some of these strengths that neurodivergent people have, they're really significant. And the majority of neurotypical people wouldn't have, say, the spatial abilities of somebody with dyslexia or the detail focus of somebody who is autistic. And of course, neurotypical people were told they are normal because they are the majority. So why is it important? Why is neurodiversity and neurodivergent inclusion important? Well, first up, because everybody is important. I think we can all agree on that, can't we? Everybody's important. And because it benefits everyone. Like I said at the beginning, neurodiversity and inclusion is about everyone. You include neurodivergent people, you make things better for everybody. And finally, because money. Now, some people don't like talking about money when it comes to neurodiversity. But as Homer Simpson said, money can be exchanged for goods and services. So I think it's an important conversation to have, because I want to emphasize here, neurodiversity inclusion isn't just a nice to have, it's essential. And let's take a look at why. So first of all, according to Equal Approach in 2017, inclusion gives you a ridiculous return on investment. They found that for every £1 you spend on inclusion, you get 5 times ROI, return on investment. So, you will find other studies supporting this. Whatever you spend on inclusion, you get more money as a profit. And this is one reason why, is because neurodivergent people are productive. So Harvard Business Review found that neurodivergent people across the board are 30% more productive than their peers. JP Morgan Chase found in their autism program that went to 90% with autistic people. And when autistic people were working on projects that they enjoyed and they were happy, that went up to 140%. They were 140% more productive than their peers. And there's another advantage to inclusion too. Your employee retention goes bananas. So Neurodiversity in the Workplace in 2020 found that on their autism at work programs, they were seeing a retention rate of 98%. In the UK, it's around about 70%. And to be blunt, I didn't believe this when I found this out. So I contacted the CEO and I said, what time period is this over? Is this over a year or what? And he said, no, it's over 5 years. So over 5 years, only 2 people were leaving out of every 100 and needing to be replaced, which is a startling employee retention rate and saves so much money. So if you want to be inclusive, what do you need to do? You need to learn and build and craft. So first up, learning about neurodiversity. Well, you're doing that right now. You've already done step 1. If you want to learn any more, there's plenty of books, websites you can go to, videos, tons of resources about neurodiversity, loads of good podcasts around at the moment. Any aspect of neurodiversity you fancy learning about, there's something for you to go and learn about it. Secondly, building an inclusive culture. This is really important. You can't sort of fiddle around the edges. You need to have inclusion running through your culture. And so how do you do that? Well, it's by listening to neurodivergent people, trying to understand us, being sort of chill and relaxed about it, modeling the behavior that you want to see, demonstrating what you want to see. So, for example, being authentic and being open about perhaps, your own neurotype or your own mental health struggles even. Just being authentic and allowing other people to be authentic around you. And of course, having fun with it as well. We don't always have to be serious when it comes to neurodiversity. And finally, crafting a welcoming environment. So you've already got those ideas. Like I said about, the octopus at the beginning, you're already able to have a bigger impact than you imagine. And you've already got some ideas that are workable. So you can share these ideas to help craft that welcoming environment, whatever it might be around, whether it's, trading tasks or helping somebody prioritize or offering the sort of support you think might be good. All that goes towards helping craft a welcoming environment. Even things like bring fidget toys, like I've brought this frog with me today. Just little things like that, they make a huge difference, because it's not just about the things that you're doing, it's about communicating that you're willing to learn and accommodate neurodiversity. So to sum that up, what do I need to do? 1 is to learn about neurodiversity. Secondly, build an inclusive culture. And thirdly, craft a welcoming environment. But what's the secret sauce in all this? What's the one thing that you need to make the rest of it work? It's attitude. It's wanting to be inclusive. And the brilliant thing is, you already have it, because you've turned up today to listen to me, which is brilliant. Because, everybody wants to be inclusive. To be included, right? It's nice for anyone to want to feel welcomed. But for neurodivergent people like me, it's even more important, because often we spent our whole lives not being wanted. We're told that we're stupid, that we're lazy, that we're weird, that we're a challenge to be overcome, or we're a problem, or that nobody really wants us. So when you come to something like this and say, yes, we want to learn, yes, we're willing to start being inclusive, to finding out more, seeing some of the things that we could start doing, that's absolutely brilliant. So for me, and for neurodivergent people like me, I just like to say thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Really, really insightful. And people made the inspiring workplaces you work for. I was screaming yes when you started saying that at the beginning of the talk. So many questions, but I think what was great at the end, how you wrapped it all up, is obviously if you're trying to create cultures where everybody feels like they belong. So, if you just have that as the default, whether you understand or know that they're neurodiverse or not at that stage, how do you want to work? How do you want to be treated? How do you want to communicate with each other? That then hopefully will cover a whole manner of sins or mistakes that you could make if you just have that default setting to treat everybody as individuals and as how they want to be treated. It's just I'm just there's so much to process there, because for somebody who and for those who aren't in the UK, I think it's quite hard to try and be diagnosed or find out if you are neurodiverse or have neurodiversity. I'm probably saying that wrong, because for somebody whose wife is absolutely adamant I have one of those things you went through, and the leopard, well, not the cheetah was, well, she'd be laughing her head off right now at that about me. It's I think, well, where am I trying to go with this and trying to form a rational thought? For those that might think and might do, not just might think, probably do have, but they haven't been able to get diagnosed. And that must be quite a struggle for that person, and therefore the organisation that they work for, if there's not the ability to have that diagnosis. And I was wondering if you have any experience of that and how to work your way through that in that gap of not knowing.
Yeah. Well, first up, self-diagnosis is valid. Some people choose never to get a formal diagnosis, and that's fine. People know, if they know enough about neurodiversity, they know if they're ADHD or autistic or whatever it might be. Secondly, you don't need a diagnosis to get support, and this will vary on where you live in your organisation, but you're able to advocate for yourself, whether you're diagnosed or not. It is quite challenging for a lot of people, especially people of my generation, older people, because we're not used to doing that.
Yeah.
But you can support and be supported without a diagnosis. And even if you're not really sure, you think, oh, maybe do I help me? Oh, I don't know. You can still be supported with the things that you're struggling with. Yeah. So one thing we suggest when people say, what about the gap, which you described very nicely then, is we say, well, what specifically are they struggling with? Because every neurodivergent person will have different issues anyway. Is it prioritizing? Is it time management? Is it spelling? Are they struggling to, are they taking a long time because they're not sure if what they've written is grammatically conventional or not? How do you deal with that problem? How do you deal with that challenge? And then the other side of that is, if you think someone has that issue, they're going to have those strengths that I mentioned as well. So at the same time as managing those challenges, you think, I think that person might be dyslexic. I think maybe they've got dyscalculia. That means they're probably going to be good at the spatial stuff, the visual stuff, the problem solving strategy. What can we involve them in where they're going to thrive? Because that's half of it. We feel so much more confident when we're doing the things that we're good at. And it's really nice when people recognize their strengths. We feel seen.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite, what's the word, philosophies from an organization I saw a few years ago was growth through diversity and diversity of thinking. And I've latched onto that immediately, because I think, again, we were talking about neurodiversity, but just the whole blend of people that exist, and the ideas from our own backgrounds, our experiences, how we're made, it can bring so much to a team, to life, to an organization. So I'm super grateful for you sharing your expertise and lending your time to us today. And I, for one, are more informed and want to go learn more than I did 25 minutes ago. So thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to finish on before we go?
I'd just like to say thank you for having me, really, and thank you for the people who've tuned in today, because this stuff is so important to me, and it affects so many people's lives. And even if you just do one tiny thing, even if it's just learning some more. That's absolutely brilliant, and I'm genuinely grateful to you for inviting me and for the people watching. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, and I will be in touch, I'm sure. So have a great rest of your day. Take care.